Hi everyone! In today's video, we'll be making a timeline, a tracker component. So like this. To get started, what I recommend you have is some like color styles, color scales. I'm just going to grab the ones that I had from the color styles tutorial. And then you do want to have some icons handy. So I have the phosphor icons set here, but you can choose any set that you like and you'll be ready to get started. I'm going to begin by creating a text layer, and this is going to be our title, and I'll just call it title. I'll make it much bigger, 20 pixels. We'll keep enter. I will jump the font weight to semi-bold, so jump it by 2 to create a better distinction between the font weights. And we'll also set a line height for 150%. And then I'm going to create another text layer. This one is going to be our location, and this one is going to be our date. So for this ones, I'll just keep the line height at auto, and I want to keep them regular. And then they can also be slightly smaller, like 16 pixels. And from here, what we can do is combine all these 3 layers into auto layout, and we'll set the spacing to 8. And then for our location and date, we'll update the color to be like 800. And then for this one, let's say we're going to start with our like neutral variant, just this blue one here. So I'm going to change this one to blue. And the very last thing, I always want the location layer to be uppercase. So what I'm going to do is go to this 3 dots icon here, and then I'll update the case to always be uppercase. The next thing we're going to do is the tracker line on the left. So what I'm gonna do is create an ellipse, and this one is going to be very tiny. We'll make it 12 by 12. And I'm going to change the color of this one to, again, like blue 700. And then we're going to create a rectangle, and we'll keep the width at 4, and we'll just give it a very slight rounding of 1 pixel. And we'll also update the color to blue 700. And then what I'm going to do is first wrap this circle into its own auto layout frame. I don't need any horizontal padding, and I'll keep the vertical at 8. And then I'm going to combine it together with this line. And I want it to be centered, and I don't want any spacing in between. The next thing I want to do is combine these 2 layers together. And we'll set the spacing between to 16. And actually what we can do now is make it a variant, and we can call it like a tracker. A couple first things that we want to add here is first, we want our location to be optional. As you can see here, I have an example that doesn't have a location included. So what I'm going to do is go first select the layer, then go over to the layer section here, click on this icon, and we can just do location, and we'll keep it true by default. But then if we have an instance of our component and we hide it, it just goes away. The other thing that we want to add is, as you can see, for this very first event here, I want to be able to have like another one of these dots that just signifies the start of the timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'll copy this one, and I'll bring it down at the end, and we can call it like end. And same thing, I'm going to go to the layer section, click on this icon, create property, and I'll just call it end. And this one by default, we'll want to set it to false. And so here, I can turn it on, and it will be here. A couple naming things for our layers. We can also rename this to start and this to line, just so it's clear what is what. The next thing that we could start doing is adding some more variants. So our success variant here, and then we're also going to have an error variant, which I hope will never happen, but we should design for it anyway. So what I'm going to do is click this icon here, and it will create an additional variant. And what I'm going to do is first swap the colors from blue 700 to green 700. And I guess one thing we want to make sure is that our end also gets updated with the right color, which, as you can see, it didn't here. So one more small thing that we can do to our component set overall is just to add auto layout so that whenever we turn on some hidden properties, they don't overlap. From here, we can go ahead and update this end piece to green 700 as well. And I'll just keep it shown by default for now while we're working with the component, and then we'll hide it at the end. And then what we're going to do is we'll change this property 1 to status, and this one is going to be neutral. And this one is going to be success. And one thing about success and error states especially is that you don't want just to use the color to convey the meaning. So what we can do is that we can replace, let's say, this circle here with an icon that also signifies success. So what I'm going to do is go to phosphor icons and let's search for check. And I have this fill icon set enabled. So I'm going to click on that, copy, and I'll bring it over to our file. And actually, I just want to take this out, and then for the actual icon, we'll scale it way down. And I'm going to place it inside here. And from here, I will wrap it inside its own auto layout frame. And we want the horizontal set to 0 and vertical to about 2. And then we'll update the overall spacing in between to 4. And last thing we need to do is replace the icon color to green 700. And that's our success variant. So our next one we can do is the error state. So what we're going to do is first replace the color to red. And we're going to change the value from status 3 to error. And we'll need to update the icon. So I'm just going to get the X circle and go back. Again, I'll just take this out of the frame and scale it down to 24. And we're going to place it right inside this frame and remove this. Update the color. And here's our error state. So one thing that you probably notice now is that the width for our neutral variant is much smaller than the width for the success and error states because the icon is bigger. So one thing that we can do with these lines here is set the width to fixed, and we'll make it 24. One thing that we can do once again is maybe add some more descriptive names to our layers. So for this ones, instead of frame 2, we want to call it an icon. And that's more or less the gist of the component. But there are a couple of very important things that we need to account for just so that our component doesn't appear broken when someone's trying to use it. So currently the width of the tracker event is dependent on the width of the content inside it. But we actually want to reverse it. So instead of it being set to hug the contents, we want it to be set to fixed. And let's say we want like the max width ever to be 400 pixels. And again, it's kind of hard in Figma to do all the responsive things. But let's say we want it to be only 400. And then if for some reason, like the title or location needs to wrap to the second line, it wraps to the second line and doesn't overflow out of bounds. But what's going to happen now is if, let's say, we have a very long location, it just kind of keeps on going way beyond our limits. So one thing that we can do is first, we're going to select the overall auto layout frame for the title, location, and date, and we'll set it to fill. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for each of the text layers. And we'll set them to fill. And so now you can see this location string that I put in here, it just wraps to the second line. So this was the first thing. The second thing is, let's say we have another a long update and we just kind of keep on going and going. And so what happens with this line here is that it's supposed to extend and fill the height of the container, but it doesn't. Currently it's just fixed, so it's kind of just hanging there. So what we can do is we're going to select this, and from fixed, we're going to set it to fill the container. And then we're going to select not just the line here, but the overall auto layout frame for the circles and the line. And we'll set it to fill as well. And as you can see, the line got super tiny because it just matches the height of our content here. So one thing that we can do is we can add a big bottom padding to the 3 text layers. So let's do we'll keep it 0 at the top, but we'll do 48 at the bottom. And what happens now is that we just have a little bit more space. So when we have a bunch of events stacked on top of each other, they are not going to be too squished. And actually, one more thing we can do is now we no longer need the end. So we'll set it to false. And we can also reorder properties to be status, then location, and then the end piece. All right, what we can do now is go to our example here, and I'm just going to grab it and paste it here, and we're going to recreate a mini version of it just to see if there are any other edge cases that we did not account for. One thing I want to add is that, yeah, usually if I create something that might have an indeterminate number of Lego pieces inside it, kind of like this timeline it can have like 5 events, it can have 10 events. I usually don't create this big timeline component with many events or like with many variants for a different number of events, just because I feel like it adds lots of clunkiness. And I'd much rather create like one Lego piece. And then if I need to create a timeline, I will just piece them together literally. Anyway, so let's start. I'm just going to do like three of these events, and we'll start with the end one, the location, and date. And then I'm going to copy this one and we'll set it to neutral. And let's do this one. Can update the time. And I'll combine these two together, and they don't need any spacing for the auto layout because the built-in padding here is already kind of maintains a little bit of space in between these two lines. And let's do just the very last one. We'll add an end piece, and we'll update the title and the location. If we wanted, we could also make it slightly bigger. That's about it for the tracker component. It's simple, but it has some like little quirky things that we need to keep in mind. So I hope you find this video useful, and I will leave the link to the Figma file in the description. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.